One second. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you all doing?
I'm doing great. Hope you are.
Doing good. Thank you for asking. Keisha, I don't know how this is Vega. I don't know how I'm managing to miss not receiving the agenda unless they didn't send one out for last month.
Check the chat.
Thank you so
I
much.
just posted the agenda and make sure to sign the sign-in sheet.
Um, okay, so you said to check the chat and that's when we
The chat has the meeting agenda, the sign-in sheet. Yeah.
okay, my chat doesn't. I don't have anything in my chat yet. Am I overlooking something? Let me see. Okay, thank you. I see it now.
Okay. We're
Okay,
great.
thank you. Let me
You're
sign in
welcome.
first before I do that agenda.
Okay. Good afternoon, Ebony. If you check the chat, I have information about the public comment and the excused absences, the sign-in sheet and the agenda.
Hi, Keisha. I think once, because I was late and you put it in the chat before I arrived, it's nothing there.
I just resent it. Check, see if we get it this time.
Okay. Refresh. There is nothing there. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. I add that to my notes. Have we reached quorum?
We're 6 away from quorum.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll begin shortly.
Good afternoon.
We're just 2 more away from quorum. We have quorum.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So great to see your faces. I hope everyone is doing well. At this moment, we are calling the October 23rd, 2024 ASAC meeting to order at 3:03. Some housekeeping rules. All HSAC members, please add HSAC to your name. And if you're not certain to do that, press the 3 little buttons beside mute. I'm gonna do it with this. I'll do a tutorial at the same time. I'm gonna press the 3 buttons beside mute. Click rename and add HSAC. Did not take me that long to add 4 little words. Okay. Let me get back to my notes. All right, so remember to check the chat to complete the sign-in form. Remember to stay muted unless you're coming off mute to speak. Raise your virtual hand if you have a question. Questions in the chat will be monitored by the Community Development Department team. One announcement, we would like to welcome our new DCRC new Executive Director, Ms. Shayna. Shayna will represent the domestic violence seat for HSAC. Welcome, Shayna. All right, moving along. At this time, there are no public comments, so we're just moving along. We're gonna move to the approval of minutes. That's me again. So I'm gonna open the floor to make a motion to approve August the 14th meeting minutes.
We may need to table those. I'm not 100% sure they got sent out. So we may need to be approving those minutes unless they went out today.
I sent them out right before.
Wow.
Gonna-
Okay.
We're gonna approve August minutes, is what she
Perfect.
shared.
August minutes, yes.
Mhm. They're keeping me straight, Collins. Colin.
You
Do
got,
you
sorry, I'm in a conference, so I missed some of the emails.
That's okay.
Madam Chair, Helen Tripp, I will move to approve the August minutes.
This is Eliza Matthew. I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor indicate yes in the chat. Against indicate no, and abstain as needed. And then the lead agency, please ensure that the minutes are sent to for our review at least 1 week before our next HSAC meeting. Okay, so now we're gonna turn it over to Vice Chair Reverend Bond for an executive committee quarterly report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Executive Committee quarterly report, the things we've been working on are planning the HSAC meetings, the discussion about finding a chair for the Performance Management Committee that is still outstanding. And we will talk about this a little bit later. We had a discussion about a strategic plan, and we'll share more about that later on in the agenda. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Reverend Bond. We're now going to turn it over to Anthony Henderson for a consolidated application and priority ranking update.
For the moment you've all been waiting for. Good afternoon. It's nice to see everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share what's happening with our COC competition. So the elephant in the room is that we hope to vote on it today and you only received it today. So we are requesting to move the vote for the application to an email vote on Friday. However, at the end of my presentation today, I will ask for the approval of the ranking and priority listings since those have been accepted by the Performance Management Committee. So I'm going to go through, hopefully you can see my presentation. I'm going to go through a quick recap of this year's competition. I'm going to go fast and cover a lot of time. So ask me questions if you need to, but HUD announced the COC competition this year on July 31st as a 2-year NOFO. So the great news is that we're doing it once this year and won't have to do it again for 2 years unless there's a special NOFO that's released next year. We announced it to the COC on August 26th. We held an application workshop on August 30th. We determined the priority for COC bonus to be new or expanded PSH projects. Throughout this time, we revised and streamlined scorecards and the scoring process. Sorry, everybody, I think I'm getting a note to do this. Let's see. There we go. There were 13 submissions, which we were extremely happy about because we wanted to take advantage of every available dollar for our system, including 9 renewals and 4 new project applications. We were fortunate enough to secure 7 reviewers to review those applications, including 3 members from here, this group, HSAC, 3 lead agency staff, and 1 lived experience work group member. We had 5 of these folks to review new projects and 2 that reviewed renewal projects and ultimately developed the scoring that led to the ranking that you will approve at the end of this presentation. We completed these reviews on October 4th. And since that time, we began working with the new project applicants to strengthen their submissions and have also been writing the consolidated application. So a little bit about the scoring. There are 200 points possible in the consolidated application. Last year, we earned 150 points, which was very near the median score for all COCs. The highest scoring COC earned 185 points. I'm not a sports dude, but I'm very competitive. So we immediately began looking for ways to increase our scores to be at or above the highest scoring COC. So we, early in the process, we identified a strategy to improve our scores And there were 4 questions that we determined could lead to a 30-point increase in our application. So we focused on those, but we also looked at all the questions and improved everywhere possible for the possibility of earning additional points. We sent the draft out today to you all. There's one section that was not included that we are working on between this afternoon and tomorrow morning that we will send out. It's a very brief section, so you won't have a lot more to review. And that'll go out tomorrow, but we did want to get the bulk of it out today so that you all would have a chance to review it and be able to cast your vote by email on Friday, October 25th at noon. So we will send out a poll to you tomorrow that will be due back by noon on Friday, encouraging you to vote in support of our consolidated application. All right, a few cliff notes on the application for this year. If you are an enthusiast and plan to read all the pages, you know, these applications vary only slightly from year to year. So a lot of the information may be already familiar to you. Also, if you have been a provider or working on a committee, a lot will be familiar to you, and you've even contributed in some ways to the narrative. The key places that had more substantial changes was the coordinated entry policies and procedures and a revamp of some of the processes. We were able to put enhanced information on our lived experience work group, particularly a section highlighting some of the accomplishments of lived experience work group members. We were able to even highlight some of the work of lived experience that served the HEART team with regard to their surveys that they've done for feedback from unsheltered, sheltered, and transitional housing populations, as well as a series of podcasts that they were highlighted on earlier this year. So we were able to feature some of that in the lived experience section of this application that you'll see. There were also a couple of questions regarding increase in rapid rehousing bids. Last year, we showed a decrease in bids and missed out on 9 points. This year, the data center reported, thankfully, that we had an increase. So those are 9 extra points we expect to get. And then we looked at system performance measures where we focused on what are our strategies to reduce the length of time homeless and to ensure that exits into housing from shelter are successful, as well as exits from program moving on to other permanent housing are successful. This year, we also improved our leveraging ability on housing and healthcare. So HUD awards 14 points if you can prove that you are leveraging new applications for housing and healthcare. We did get new projects and they both came with leverage. So we are hoping to achieve those points as well. So that's the Cliff Note version of what's available to you in your email as we speak. And I want to just take a moment and let you all know kind of what available funding looks like and how we do what we do. So HUD sends us a couple of reports at competition time. One is an annual renewal demand report. And the other is a grant inventory worksheet. So both of these you see on this slide. The first part with the amounts going across PPRN, estimated ARD, tier 1, all that stuff, is the annual renewal demand report. HUD determines what it's going to take for our projects to renew and gives us that entire amount along with any amount that they anticipate will be eligible for bonus funding, for the COC. Bonus funding for domestic violence, and then we also have a COC planning grant that we submit that covers things like salaries for the system to support this process throughout the year. So this is a actual snapshot of our grant inventory worksheet, and you can see all of our renewal projects. This particular year, although the LGBTQ Center was eligible for a renewal of $302,000, they voluntarily reallocated that so that those funds could remain in the system and be used by another agency because they were not prepared to continue with the project at this time. So we were able to take care of all of that. And then I want you to understand how we process that information. So HUD funds in tiers. Tier 1, they establish your annual renewal demand, and then they tell you that tier 1 is 90% of that. So our annual renewal demand was $2,017,000. 90% of that is 1.8 million. And then tier 2 is the other 10% of the annual renewal demand plus the bonus funding that's available. Tier 1 is essentially, I hate to use the word guaranteed, but sort of like that, right? And then tier 2 is more competitive with other COCs across the country. And the higher your consolidated application score, the more likely you are to get those projects funded if the funding is available. Okay, we also, as many continuums do, fund our renewal projects or rank our renewal projects first, followed by our new projects. In some cases, as you will see today, a new project can sort of trump a renewal project, and I'll show you that next. So this is our local competition selection results. Again, a big shout out to those that participated, the 7 reviewers that helped us make sense of all of this. On this spreadsheet, you can see the applicant, the project, the type, the score that they achieved, and then their rank. You will notice that at the bottom of the list of tier 1 is a new project, and that is because our renewal funding did not make up the entire annual renewal demand because of the reallocation from the LGBT Center. So we took the balance of that and awarded in tier 1 to a new PSH project. And then tier 2 is the balance of the new project requests with 3 applications coming from Family Promise of Wake County. I should say you see project access right above the line and right below the line for tier 2. It's the same project. We just didn't have all of the available funding in tier 1, so we had to split it across the line. And then Family Promise, the final 3 entries, 11, 12, and 13 in rank are the 3 applications from the other new project, Family Promise. Okay, so this is the priority ranking. This is what we're asking this committee to go ahead and approve. It has been accepted by performance management. And I will entertain any questions or a motion to approve the priority listing. And Madam Chair, I might have said your words. Maybe you were supposed to say that.
That's okay. Do we have any questions for Anthony? Sharita, go ahead.
Hi, Anthony.
Hi.
I'm looking at this chart and I'm just trying to make sure that I understand what I'm looking at.
Okay.
So you kind of gave us like the rundown. So am I correct in when I'm seeing this, is that every project that applied has been recommended for funding?
That's correct.
Okay. And we're not like over a budget, under a budget, like this is the money that we have and this is how we, okay,
Yes, I'm really, really glad that you asked
I'm
that question
excited.
because in a lot of competitions, you expect to get more requests than you have available funds for. And then it becomes a really ferocious kind of competition, you know, like our ESG one, right? So in this case, thankfully, we did not have that issue. We gave people an opportunity to renew at the amount that was allowable by HUD for the renewals. And then we had these bonus projects that were available. And we were able to be transparent and to talk to agencies about what was available. And just to be honest, Family Promise, you know, Project Access came in at the amount that they came in. And Family Promise wanted an opportunity to absorb the balance across their projects. So that is kind of the way it happened, and we didn't have any other projects that sought to enter the competition. So because of that, it just was we lucked up. That's the best way I can say it. We lucked out. I'm really happy that we lucked out because I didn't want to leave any money on the table if it were available to our system. And so it looks like we're on track to, you know, if we score high enough in the application, be able to award certainly all of tier 1, but hopefully much or all of tier 2 as well.
And so at this point, we submit this and then our hands are out of it and the awards go however they go, correct?
Correct.
I would just say thank you so much. I am, you know, this can be a very contentious part of what we do, just because of the competition. And so I feel inside of myself that this is a really good example of us as an entire system working together to recognize that we need a lot of things and that we're going to make sure that nobody is left out and we are trying to do a better job in filling the gaps. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I guess I'll give a motion if nobody else has any questions.
Are there any other questions before Sharita gives us a motion?
I have a quick question just to check in. I'm assuming that performance management like felt similarly to what Sharita just shared in their approval of moving this forward. Just wanted to check in on that, if there's any conversations at that level that should be elevated to full HSAC.
I will invite performance management members to jump in and talk about their experience.
I don't recall any major discussion at our last meeting. I joined Sharita with excitement and joy that we have the resources to support all of these projects.
Great.
Thank you, Reverend Vaughn. I will say, as the person at the lead agency putting it together, it was difficult, sort of like with ESG, to get everybody together at the same time. So what we had to do was create this sort of, along the way, we created a bunch of office hour sessions so that reviewers could jump in at any point that they were available with questions about their reviews. And then at the end, we had debrief sessions or review sessions. And we had like 3 of those where the reviewers could jump in and kind of see the results of the work and be okay. So we did send out emails and have a bunch of sessions and things like that. So I feel like everybody left the process feeling complete, that it was, we didn't leave anything on the table and that there were not a lot of questions. You know, when people saw the ranking list, it sort of mirrored the scores they gave to the applications. So they felt good about that as well. So I think the process was pretty good.
Good afternoon. This is Vega Swepson. Just to concur with what Reverend Vaughn said earlier in her comments, and also to thank Anthony and Ricky and Community Development for their support. He just laid out for you what happened to make the process smoother in terms of us as reviewers. So I was very appreciative of their patience with especially me, and just making the process really smooth. And we're excited that these agencies will all get an opportunity. So that's definitely a yay. And thank you for your comment, Sharita.
I will second Sharita then, to keep us moving.
Okay, Anthony, it looks like we have a second. All in favor indicate yes in the chat. Against indicate no or abstain if needed.
While that's happening, I will just conclude with my special thank you to the evaluation subcommittee. They thoughtfully scored projects, gave us comments. We have records of all of the comments. We used a new platform to score. And we were able to take that feedback and provide it to the new applicants to strengthen their applications that they're submitting in eSNAP. So we're really excited about that. Our reviewers were Vegas Webson, Nick Periante, and Renee Vaughn from HSAC. We had Namaya Stamps, who is with Open Table Ministries as our lead presence on the reviewer team. And then we had Ricky, Jeffrey, and Melva as lead agency staff, working alongside the other reviewers to complete the process. So thank you to everybody that participated in this.
And thank you so much, Anthony. Just keep in mind, everyone, that we will vote for the consolidated application via email. We have until Friday, October 25th, no later than noon. Okay. All right, so we're going to move to the strategic plan. We're going to turn it back over to Reverend Vaughn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At our last HSAC meeting, we had quite a robust discussion regarding determining our priorities and the need for a strategic planning process to help us determine those priorities and then be able to make an impact on our goals and objectives. And so as a result of that, we're bringing forward the need for a consultant to help us to facilitate this process. Not sure what else to say, but we also want to be able to have a process where we have more community engagement and raise awareness as to what it is that is actually going on to assist our priorities and to have a better reporting ability for the key metrics that we develop. Is there any other discussion?
Any questions? Okay, Sharita?
I'm sorry, I always have questions.
No, that's good. Don't apologize.
Thank you very much for bringing this matter, Reverend Vaughn, up. I just have a few questions about like the plan. You said you mentioned a consultant, so I don't know if we need to vote on that formally. But my question that goes along with that is there, and maybe I missed this in the last meeting, was there like a group of people that convened to talk about just the strategic plan? And that's how it came to this place of wanting to move forward with a consultant. And then my last question is how we would pay for it.
Well, actually, I think your concern at the last meeting touched all of our hearts because we had so many things that we wanted to be able to support, and you brought us to the brink of a vote on that last item to move forward. You wanted for us to support it in a greater way. And so I believe as a result of that, at that time during that discussion, it was brought to our attention, I believe by Russ, that there was a potential pot of money that would possibly be available to assist us. We basically, from my understanding, the ILA in the past, we had a 10-year process for strategic planning that ended. We officially don't have a strategic plan in place, and that is something that the community often asks us about. And so that discussion just continued, I believe, at the last executive committee meeting as well. So as a result of that, it just seems as though everything that we have that we're currently working on, we really don't have anyone else that could step forward to help guide us in this process, where we can really define our priorities, look at our goals, objectives, have some strategy around meeting the needs that are outstanding, et cetera. And I believe, Russ, you have your hand up. Perhaps you have something else you can add.
I think Eliza had her hand up before me.
Oh, Eliza, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Well, I think I'm getting the go ahead. So just to say, yeah, I shared last month. So a couple really quick key points. My understanding of the ILA is we're required to be operating with a strategic plan. So we are out of compliance with the interlocal agreement and have been since apparently 2016. The key money factor is that at the end, and I'm hoping I've got my history right. I always have to go back and check with Terry Alabon team. But there was 10,000 left over from the 10-year plan that originally sat at Triangle Community Foundation. It was then sent to us to hold, I believe, at the direction of the HSAC. There was an attempt to use it for a project for like fixing up damage from their tenants from the system that had already concluded by the time I arrived 5.5 years ago. So the money's just been sitting, and our auditors would love to have it off our books. And this seems like a very good use if it came from the 10-year plan for us to say, hey, let's put this toward getting a consultant for facilitating the creation of a strategic plan. Yeah.
Thank you, Russ. That's very helpful. As a result of our conversation, I did go back and take a look at the ILA. And I believe, Eliza, you have more to add?
Yeah, I think just a few questions. I think this is great. I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. My first question is around timeline, like, how long does it take to find a consultant, begin the work? And that leads into this other question around there are a lot of things happening in the space. And so, like, even just myself, I'm thinking, okay, a part of what I've committed to do is thinking about governance. Does that actually make more sense as a part of a strategic plan rather than two separate things? Then looking across the city, we often talk about lots of groups that are gathering. Something that is newer is the City County Schools Task Force. Are there ways that we're thinking about integrating some of that work instead of duplicating, dependent on the timeline? So just thinking about people's capacity, I think this is really great. And like, how do we mobilize folks to center around a couple things that are going to really move us forward?
Well, it sounds like we do need something comprehensive that could bring all of these pieces together, or to be a part of, to make sure that we are a part of all of these other efforts.
Russ?
I was just going to say, it may be helpful. Liza brings up a really good point. There are multiple processes going on right now. It might be helpful for some work to be done out of the HSAC membership in particular, of like what this could look like, what the scope is, kind of piece. I'm not sure if that's something executive could do or could do in partnership with some others to bring back for review. I would feel very comfortable with us affirming today, like, yes, let's move this direction. Let's plan to use the money that's available for that. And then put some meat on the bone, so to speak, of what that process would look like and who it might involve.
So I can help out a little bit on this. And in the Forever Home Durham budget, there is a little bit of money for like technical assistance in the homeless system, which my goal would be to tap into that as well, because $10,000 may not cover an entire strategic plan, especially with the scope and pulling all these other pieces together. And the city does have to pull together a consultant to work on the consolidated plan, which is the next 5-year plan that goes to HUD, and looking to sort of pull those funds together and be able to procure, you know, the con plan writer, the annual action plan consultant, and also from that same type of procurement process, pull in the strategic planning group for the homeless system, which may be the same person, it may be a totally different group, but sort of using that and being able to pool the resources in a collaborative way to move that. And that would be, and that process is going to start sooner than later, just because the con plan is due. I don't remember the exact date, but not too far into 2025, it's due. So that the procurement process would happen sooner than later. And yes, a strategic plan does take time to write and work through and pull together all the stakeholders. As you'll recall, at policy and planning, we did talk about the strategic plan has to be done, and policy and planning did put together a few priority items that while the strategic plan is being looked at, the policy and planning committee did provide some feedback on items that really should be looked at as a priority 1 category, as a stopgap to keep us focused on the next steps, as kind of an interim step of we need to look at these items while we're building out the the strategic plan for the system, to sort of be able to, as Sharita said, make a difference in the near term while we look at the long-term solutions.
Sharita, I saw your hand, and if you could also address your questions in the chat.
I think Colin summed it up. I was just going to bring up the discussions we had in policy and planning around this. I think policy and planning definitely believes that we do need to move forward and get in compliance with the fact that we don't have a strategic plan, but we also recognize that we have a lot of competing issues around homelessness in Durham and what the landscape is starting to look like today that make us all a little bit concerned about, you know, waiting out a strategic plan to move and what we will look like by the time, you know, what will our community look like by the time a strategic plan is completed if we don't act on some things. So I just want to just keep bringing that to folks' attention, because, you know, we look at a lot of numbers, but these are lives. These are breathing people that are experiencing homelessness every day, who are experiencing aging more rapidly the longer they endure homelessness, and they're sicker, and they're not, you know, they become more difficult to employ, and it's just a snowball effect. You know, the person that we're looking at today, 2 years from now, could look like a totally different person. You could probably put pictures together and be amazed at how different they look. And so I just want to just keep bringing us to that place that while we do look at numbers and we do look at compliance, we have people out here in our city that are really in need and are hurting. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharita. You always make sure that we come back to the essential point, and that is what we're really trying to do, so that we can get those priorities and then tactics along the way, perhaps, that can help make an impact even as we are planning. Appreciate that.
And to
Reverend
Eliza's,
Bond, there's one more, I'm sorry.
to Eliza's point about the governance piece, that's something HSAC could sort of say, do we want to wrap governance into this with an outside facilitator to help with that? That's something that could be done. There's a lot of things that we could do with this scope of work. It's really, where is the bandwidth? And as we all know, we've all got full-time jobs and there's plenty of work to do. So I would say anything we could take off of our plates and move to a consultant to help get it done may move it along a little bit faster, just because they're paid to solely focus on that one item, or 2 items or 10 items or whatever the item list is. And they would be working, you know, they're not going to come and do the work for us, but they'll do the work and get the input from us and coordinate getting it all put together.
Okay. There was one question in the chat, and I'll get to your hands. Reverend Vaughn, it says, can we explore reallocation of funds if we have funds left over in the budget for programs, marketing, consultant, workshops, etc.?
Well, that is a great point. I'm not sure I'm the person to answer it, though. Perhaps Colin could
Colin.
assist with that.
Um, it depends. It depends on the funding source. That's the best answer I can give you. Generally speaking, there isn't leftover money in our continuum. Our continuum of care money is allocated and spent. Our ESG money is allocated and spent. HOPWA money is allocated and spent. There's maybe little pieces here and there that might be able to be pulled together for some of that. I think we want to be very strategic on how we use those funds, and that may be better parceled out after we get through a strategic plan that looks at what are we doing as a community? What is our spending plan? Where's all of our money currently going? What are we getting what are the outcomes that we are getting for the money that's currently being invested? What are the things that we're not investing in that we should be investing in? And then work to do those pieces as well.
Rita?
I would just like want to take advantage of this opportunity to just plug policy and planning. I think we've talked about this before. A lot of the work that becomes the finished products that anybody on this meeting today who can hear my voice, a lot of that work is done in policy and planning and performance management. We really need your voice. If you want to have a place where you can bring your wisdom, your expertise, your experiences to help further the work that we do for our community. A lot of that work is done outside of this meeting. So please, ma'am, please, sir, get on a committee, come to our meetings. They are public and open. You can talk and share. We can have the ability to put in place, working groups that work on specific matters, things like that. We need your voices at the table to help our responses be more robust and an adequate snapshot of our community and what our community needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Eliza.
Yeah, I just wanted to lift up what I'd heard earlier around like scope of work. I would love to move this forward, but I do think it would be helpful to kind of think out a little bit more the scope of work and the landscape of what's going on right now, and curious if that could exist in one of the subcommittee or standing committee meetings, or is another meeting. I'd be happy to join and be a part of that conversation, but that feels like a good next step. Instead of just saying, yes, we want this, I think it would be helpful to have a little bit more meat on the bones of like what that scope could look like so we could respond to that as a group.
My suggestion would be have executive committee sort of take a first pass at writing a proposed scope and sending it from executive committee to the full HSAC for feedback and discussion, and then kind of here's the wish list. And I can't promise everything on the wish list will get done, but we can at least say, here's the wish list and here's the order of priority that needs to be on there. So when we're able to put out an RFP with a scope of work, we can sort of say, here's what we want of everything. And then depending on funds available, if the scope had to be trimmed back, we could at least trim it back and fall within the priorities, and then have to come back and do other pieces. That might be a place where we could pull in universities to help out with things so that we could pull together some money, pull together universities to help with things that they might be able to do on a semester by semester basis. With students might be able to help with some pieces of it, whereas you might want a paid professional, that's all they do for a living, to come and do some of the other pieces.
Great. That sounds great. Let's just not lose the piece where other folks are kind of in this space. So how do we bring them in?
Russ?
I was just gonna say, I think Colin's idea is a good one. I wonder if a little bit of engagement from planning and policy may be good, since there's broader COC representation in that meeting. And maybe we just put out a notice to everybody in this group that, they're gonna do a deep dive into some of the detail to affirm, Sharita keeps saying we need more people. And I think part of culturally where we're trying to get with some of this is for HSAC to function at a little higher level and not be so kind of in the weeds, and have the committees be in the weeds and bring things back to this group. So affirming that a lot of the work and a lot of the kind of side comments we get in these meetings are really, they're like subcommittee conversations, and there's a really great robust place for some of that to happen. The other thing just very quickly is I think if we look at the scope, we may be able to talk to some private partners who could help supplement, because I think what we want to do is absolutely honor that there's some aspects that the lead agency needs to have done because of the COC lead agency work, as Colin referenced. But this really needs to be a COC HSAC plan with support from the lead agency, not leaving them in the position of having to drive. They can be in the front seat with us, but they don't need to be at the wheel. And so I think if we can figure out the scope, we may be able to look at some private funding sources that would have interest in seeing this move forward. And it's always quicker if we don't have to use government funds. We know that.
And we have time for one more, Miss Dorothy.
To add to what everyone is saying, I think that it's a good idea what Cullen mentioned and a few others about. I just want to add that I think everyone that's familiar with the needs, I think Sharita is great of knowing the needs because she has she's on the ground. And I think that direct contact that she's having with the recipients is very important. So I think she'd be a great addition to coming up with ideas that are needed to, assist in this manner of resolving the homelessness, because that's what we're all here for. But I wanted to say that we have some very talented folks in Durham that are retired. I've known some secretaries that were at my church, as well as other organizations that could possibly assist. The $10,000, I know it's not a significant amount. However, could it be considered as a stipend to someone can it be marketed towards people that's retired? As Cullen mentioned, students. I know when I was in school, I did an internship, and that was a free service where I was able to get college credits. So I think what he said about that, adding the colleges there and transitioning as an internship, I think we can get a bulk of people that will be able to jump on the project once we get down pat what is the scope of work. So internships, also retired school teachers or people that have some type of experience with consulting or even secretary work. I know a lot of retirees said, I want to volunteer and I want to do something. So they will be happy to receive a certain stipends, even if it's not a significant amount. So I would say we should market it or target the retirees that have experience in this particular field, and also the colleges, and we can transition it as an internship where they can receive college credits. And that would help. We don't need so much money because we have volunteers and college students that can get college credits, as well as retirees that be interested in receiving it as a stipend. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for sharing that resource. I'm Dorothy. Thank you so much. We're gonna move along to the affordable housing unit update, and we're gonna turn that over to Colin.
All right. Thank you all. I know there's been a lot of conversation.
I'm sorry, wait, Colin, I
go
think
ahead.
I'm supposed to vote on the strategic plan?
We
The
do need,
consult, the
yeah, we do
consultant?
need a motion.
A
to
motion.
Move, I guess at this point.
Or do we
I'm trying to
still
think, the
have-
motion would probably be something along the lines of the sort of asking community development or asking the lead agency to start working on procuring a strategic planning consultant, and for the HSAC to sort of pull together a scope of work that can be incorporated into that.
I don't know if I can offer that motion.
Or something along those lines. I don't know how you want to phrase it, but it'd be something along those lines, I suppose.
Could we make a motion to ask the executive committee to work with the policy and planning committee to
planning
create a
committee.
scope of work for a strategic planning process, including engagement of a strategic planning consultant? That's not the best grammar, so we can clean that out. But
I will second it, Russ.
And I'll trust the bot recorded that properly, however I said it.
I hope so.
Mm.
So we need a first and a second. Rush, are you agreeing to be the first? Yes? Yes, okay, and then Reverend Vaughn, second. Okay, and if you agree, please vote yes in the chat. Abstain if you need to, and vote no if you need to. Okay. We have questions. Dorothy and then Sharita. Dorothy, do you have a question at this time? Your hand is
Yeah,
still
I'm
raised.
sorry, my hand should have, it was the prior stuff I said. I'm sorry about that. I'm gonna lower my hand. I'm sorry.
No problem, no problem. Okay, Sharita?
So we just approved just the scope of work to be identified by HSAC and then passed on to policy and planning. Is that what we agreed? But we did not vote on the allocation of funds. Is that correct?
Right, no voting on the allocation of funds.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Mhm. Tiffany? Tiffany, do you have a question?
Can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Working on the phone sound. My question's still along the same lines as Sharita just brought up, because I was in a meeting earlier today with the Coalition for Early Childhood and Homeless Intervention. 40 coordinated intake was there and said 40 families currently unsheltered, 28 more in jeopardy. With numbers like that, is it possible for us to settle on a specific figure for the short term? Because I know this keeps being brought up, since diversion doesn't have any funding. Seems like DSS it's down to giving $750 per family, but that certainly is not enough. So are we able to come to a short-term figure just with the data that we know exists currently, as we wait for this strategic plan to, come to fruition? And that's just don't shoot the messenger, I'm just asking a question.
Colin,
Did you
do you
guys
have
get that?
So, yes, the city and county are in budget season. And this would be the time to go make requests along those lines for additional diversion. I am not aware of how much money is available right now or disposable to be able to put more money into diversion within our current budget structure yet from the Community Development Department. There may or may not be money available, and if it's a priority to the group to put money in diversion, we may have to go take money from another program to be able to make that happen. So there may have to be some conversations at some point on prioritization of where are we currently spending money if there's no additional money available. For instance, do we keep doing white flag? Do we take away landlord engagement? Do we cut back on street outreach and put more money in diversion? Do we put more money, do we pull back on rapid rehousing and put more money in diversion? So there's a lot of decisions to make. Ideally, we will be able to find a way to request additional money. And there is a citizen participation part for going for the budget cycle, and these are things that HSAC can go and request from city and county officials for additional money for this type of work. I think we've figured out the strategic planning piece, and that's really what this whole piece of the conversation was really about. And we're sort of going down some rabbit holes.
Well, I don't think this is a rabbit hole, because we originally got to the strategic plan because we were talking about an unknown number to give to diversion, and everyone agreed, it shouldn't be an unknown number, it should be a specific number. And so I'm just asking or wondering, are we able to at least take the next step where we know what funds may be potentially available? I mean, I did the math. If we match DSS for the 68 families at $750, that's $51,000. Okay, so like we can do some simple math and make. This is just me. I'm brand new. This is my second meeting. I'm not trying to shake trees. Just wondering, where we might just have a little traction in that short term instead of putting it on the back burner again. That's it. I promise.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for your concerns and your questions. Eliza, have a question?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. I understand HSAC to be a policy body, and so I think this is a good opportunity to think about why we are having this conversation late. It seems like we could potentially do a better job of understanding when money may run out at an earlier time so that we can align our requests or think about budget cycles rather than thinking about emergency requests. So I know that we're in this situation, but I think it just lifts up an opportunity for us to think about that differently, particularly because the way I understand it is if we're a policy body, it moves slow, and the last minute request pieces often don't fit well with our structure and the way we're set up. And so kind of how do we think upstream in terms of setting ourselves up differently? And then also, if I'm understanding this correctly, in the times where we're not able to think ahead or there are these emergency situations, who are the folks that can act more immediately around these items? Whether that's private partners or others in the space, and understanding kind of where those relationships are and how they can be leveraged. But again, it's hard to make that case to private partners if we're not doing a good job of kind of thinking ahead. So just wanted to add that as my understanding around like some of the tension, because I understand the need, but also I just have a hard time understanding how that connects to our like longer term policy piece as HSAC.
If I may,
Thank
I can sort of fill in a gap on the diversion piece. Diversion funds are used for a variety of things. One, transportation to get people to connect and move out of the area to go back to permanent housing somewhere else. Diversion funds can also be used to rapidly exit people to permanent housing. Security deposits, first month rent, rent arrears when getting into a unit, the landlord won't accept somebody. Now, the rapid exit funds are also an eligible expense in rapid rehousing. And we can use the rapid rehousing dollars. The challenge has been sometimes the rapid rehousing couldn't get an intake done fast enough. Or DSS couldn't get somebody seen quick enough. So the diversion funds, big chunks of money get eaten up when you talk about rent arrears, security deposits, and first month's rent. So we blew through about $120,000 in the first 6 months of in the last 12 months. And it was like an $82,000 a year budget. So that is why there is no money, because we were using these funds for things that we have other funding sources that could cover. We are now in the process of trying to reorient the system to be tapping into those rapid rehousing dollars and figuring out ways to get priority one people through the system to be able to utilize those dollars in a more expeditious manner. And that is why we are now out of funding for the diversion money. So there are still monies available within the system to help with those security deposits and first month's rent. That's why VOA has shifted to doing travel diversion only, because that's the only pot of money that does travel diversion. So just wanted to sort of share the background and how we got to where we are.
Well, thank you again for your comments and sharing your concerns. We're going to turn it back to you, Colin, so that you can talk about the updates for housing bonds.
Sure. So housing bonds, I know folks have been asking for information on this, and there's a lot of work that sort of goes into developing affordable housing. So first, city puts out RFP, a developer develops the properties, and oftentimes those properties are sort of named by whatever street they happen to be on. And then after the building gets built, the developer often will hand the day-to-day operations off to a property manager. And in that transition from a developer and being on ABC Street, the name of the developer is the developer will change the name, not the developer, the property manager, the name will go from being ABC Street Properties to, you know, the lofts on the grand scale at, you know, Durham. And then there's a new group of people. So that's where we connect these items. I do have a draft of kind of where things are. We're in the process of coordinating with property managers now to work through all of the pieces of who's what and where, what properties are currently in the works, what are completed. So I'll show you this, and there'll be more information coming, but did want to get back to you because this has been something that folks have been asking for a while. Let me see if I can find my document. So this is kind of, you can see this is kind of where we are Forever Home units. And looking at some of these are DHA properties that we need to break out and figure out which are DHA properties and which are not DHA properties. Obviously, there's a few here that are labeled as DHA. But here's sort of where we've got units, Forever Home Durham, the status. So we've got a few completed here, JFK Towers, JJ Henderson Rehab, Crescent Drive Apartments, and JJ Henderson are all completed. We've got Hardy Street Apartments with 132 units. 27 of those units are nearing completion and working on tenant selection plans currently, which we're working to figure out, and we're partnering with Housing for New Hope because Hardy Street and Housing for New Hope have an agreement in place, and we're working through how that works. I can let Russ can chime in on that if you would like to, Russ. Then we've got Bryan Place, which is completed, and there were 10 units of those 16 units that were given to the continuum of care, and we did refer 10 eligible households to Bryan Place in that building with various vouchers. A lot of them were VASH vouchers. Ashton Place is coming towards completion. Ross Road is almost complete. There were 9 units in Ross Road that were for vulnerable populations, and all 9 of those units are filled, to my understanding, from either, I believe, Alliance clients or people who were experiencing homeless through that system. Cedar Trace is nearing completion about a year from now. And now we've got all these other pipeline things, Forest Hill Heights, DHA office, Southside Phase 3 and 4, Harriet's Place is in the pipeline, Elizabeth Street, which is now under construction. Elizabeth Street is definitely a DHA property. Commerce Street is DHA, and Acra Rehab. Acra is a special housing provider. So that one is different. So this is kind of what we've got in the pipeline, and working with transitions and how do we get folks connected through the system to the property managers when these units come online. And this is the draft of the information I have at this point, because we're having to go back and pull from a compliance document. Questions?
Go ahead, Liza.
A quick question. When things are in the pipeline and they're not showing numbers in the 30% and below units, does that mean that there might be units there, or anywhere that there's not a number, there's definitely not units coming there?
I don't have an answer for that, Eliza.
Okay.
I think there's some digging that's going on through the contracts. Because I don't know. We're working this
Sure.
through. I just didn't want to have it keep going, because these are all under contract, and some of
Got
these move around a little bit based on funding and final closing deals and things like that, and whether or not there's enough money to finance everything. Go ahead, Russ.
So,
Oh, sorry.
sorry, just a quick follow-up question. So the ones where it says completed,
Mm-hmm.
those are locked in and like nearing completion, those may not be locked in as 20, like for example, Hardy Street Apartments may have less than 27 units, 30% and below, depending on their last minute, or is that set?
I don't know off the top of my head. This is all
Okay.
from multifamily development, and the folks who are experts on this were tied up in a ribbon cutting or groundbreaking today. So I'm doing the best I can to sort of relay information.
Yeah. I just don't want to, I want to interpret what you have.
Yeah.
That's
I
really.
would say
Thank
I would
you.
say the ones that are nearing completion, Bryan Place is finished. Ross Road is, if it's not 100% done, it's like 99, 95% done. And Ashton Place, I think we've got a few people leased up in there, so I believe it should be close to finished.
Russ?
So, one, just a clarification, to what Colin shared. The Hardy Street Apartments is a joint DHIC self-help project. DHIC is the lead developer, and H&H was asked when the applications were put in 2020, 4.5 years ago, if we would be the referring partner. We have and handle case management. We feel like that needs to be handled by the normal processes through the COC. So we have let them know that we are deferring on that to the lead agency in the same way that they handled Bryan Place. I will say, I want to offer an appreciation, but then a frustration. So we've been asking about this, at least I have, for 13 months now. And I appreciate that new leadership over in CD have been making progress on this. I think the piece that's alarming to me, and they're still working, and this is a draft, and they said that when I saw one of the versions a day or two ago. It's just that a lot of those RFPs have information in them about how they'll work with the homeless service system. And I think part of my concern, I don't know if this is like raised up yet to the city manager's level or not, but I know that Keith has been made aware as the person who oversees community development. But, I think we're a little concerned that there may be commitments that were made to the homeless service system that we haven't tracked. And so we may have lost some opportunities that this local bond money has been basically set aside to address some of the needs that we've got. So I guess I'm hopeful that another edition of this will come back fairly soon that would include what were the commitments that these folks made that help to the homeless service system, that help them get these awards over others, since we know that they are in there. And how can we make sure that we're moving very quickly to work on tenant selection plans and pieces? Because there's just a level of accountability for the operational piece of this for CD, but also for the developers to make sure that what our local tax dollars in particular are being invested in is happening, because part of addressing what we're talking about day in and day out, week in and week out, month in, month out, as an HSAC can be addressed if we've got these units and we're lining up and we're tracking.
Yes, Russ, we're all agreeing with you, and thank you for bringing that concern to the table, Sharita.
I didn't take my hand down fast enough. Because Russ pretty much summed it all up.
Gotcha.
But you know, when I look at this, I'm like, well, where was the notification to the homeless system that we were getting ready to have some units come online so we could take advantage of them? I don't know what the city, county, whoever is, when these RFPs are done, and yes, I understand it goes to different counties, but what is their obligation to report back in a timely manner to the place that has approved them to be able to have these projects? Like, do we have accountability pieces in there? Do we need accountability pieces in there? Because I feel like if there were allocations made for our folks, then we should be the first to know when things come online. And what I'm finding from the places that are already taking applications is that if I hadn't figured it out for myself, or somebody else who had already figured it out for themselves hadn't informed me, that my folks wouldn't even have a chance to get in the door. So I just really think that we need to do some intentional work around when housing is coming up directly in a response to a RFP with promises made to our system, that there should be some accountability pieces in that throughout the process, so that when the units become available, we can also take advantage of it, whether it be moving somebody on to open up a space that we can use with other funds or whatever that may be. We have to figure out how to smartly utilize the assets in our community that we do have. So I just add that. Thanks.
Colin, there are a few questions in the chat. I'm trying to scroll back up and make sure where we left off. I think it's Jay's question first. As this is my first meeting, does this committee also make recommendations on policy regarding panhandling and aggressive behavior from the small segment of homeless that engage in such behavior? And then Julia, are there dedicated homeless units available to the COC at any of these properties? For example, Ross Road. And then Tiffany, are we able to see anticipated timeline of the completion of for the under contract and construction to help with the real timeline numbers versus anticipated volume to come available? And then last, do we have an idea for the units for the 30 to 60% are for families and households with families of 4+?
All right, let me see if I can work through some of these.
Okay.
Are there dedicated, all right, Julia's question, are there dedicated homeless units available to the COC? So Ross Road wrote in their tenant selection plan, they had 9 units available and they would take referrals from Alliance, the COC, and maybe 2 other groups. They filled all 9 units from Alliance. So the COC got nothing out of that for whatever reason, not sure how that happened, but that's where we are with Ross Road. Are we able to see anticipated timeline of completion under contract and construction? I don't have that information. That's something I'm trying to get pinned down. As you know, construction projects will have an anticipated due date, and then things will move. Perfect example, Bryan Place, we were planning to have people moving in, I want to say March or April, and it ended up being about May or June that certificate of occupancies were finally issued, if I remember correctly. So there are delays, and that's one of the things that we are trying to pin down and do a better job of getting in front of. Idea of units for 30 to 60% for, so you're talking about basically 3 bedrooms. I don't have that number, Tasha. I think That's something that I'd have to dig into and figure out how many are 1, 2, 3 bedrooms. We're also working with the county. Do you know the county has 500 Main Street that's coming on with tax credits to figure out what of those units, and there was a request to the county to access those units when Drew Cummings was still here. And we're working to sort of see if that's still possible or not. The Affordable Housing Bond Oversight Group, Russ, I don't know, but I'm sure you could go to that group and ask some questions.
I don't think you can ask questions in that group, Colin. I've been to a meeting or two. You can't ask questions if you're not on the committee.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there's a public comment period, or send a note to you could send an email to Reginald asking for that, or to the chair of the group, I suppose. Then in terms of, are there set asides for the units? From my understanding, there are groups who have going through the RFPs, then the RFP has to translate to a contract, then the contract has to reflect that there is language in there saying that has to be there, then that has to be tied to a tenant selection plan. And the question is whether or not, and that's what the compliance team is going through right now to see which of the contracts where people had checked the box in the RFP, is there language all the way through saying you need to do this with the COC? That's the piece that's being sorted out, because if the contract does not state you have to, what you said in the RFP, then we have to go back to those vendors and see if out of their goodwill, they would come back online. So we're trying to focus on what's in place and what do we need to do to make sure anything future is accounted for and documented in the contracts correctly. And when you're using federal funds, that priorities are put in place in the con plan and the annual action plan. So there's a whole lot of moving pieces with all of this to ensure compliance on several different fronts. And unfortunately, I don't have a ton of solid answers yet, as this is these projects are all run through the multifamily team and compliance. I'm doing the best I can to report out on the information that I have. So yes, the affordable units all dedicated to the.
Is it me or is Colin frozen?
He's a little
Colin
frozen.
is frozen.
Okay. I thought it was my computer initially. Give him a moment to log back in. Anthony, I hate to put you on the spot. Are you able to answer any of the other questions that's in the chat?
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Yeah, we can now, yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, hotel internet. I'm trying to go through the other questions. So we're trying to.
Colin, turn your camera off.
All right. So we're in the process of trying to determine whether or not any of these units are able to be tied to the COC. We do know Hardy Street has one, as Rush shared, that they were selected to be the referring agency. And as Housing for New Hope has said, they would prefer to hand that over for the referral process to come through our coordinated entry system. So that is a set aside for the homeless system. Bryan Place had 10 units that were set aside. As of right now, those are the units that I am aware of, that there is a solid commitment in place for connection to the continuum of care. The other ones I don't have information on, other than the fact that wherever we've got 30 and 60% units, we're tracking down property managers to go out and see if we can work with landlord engagement to have access to some of those units. But there is no, unless the contract specifically says you must accept folks from the continuum of care, some of this is up to the property managers and their tenant selection plans. And that's the piece that we're trying to get a hold of and get ahead of on the ones that are being worked forward. And I don't know that there's anything we can go back and do on units that are already leased up.
Sharita, then Russ, I think.
So, the first question, Colin, is you were talking about the units that you do have that are dedicated from Bryan Place, and you said one other place. I just can't remember. I couldn't write everything down as fast as I wanted to believe that I could and retain it in my brain. What would you say was the difference in you being able to get that? Was that because the property management company was committed to what they believed they signed on to from the beginning, and so they were committed to making sure that they notified us when units were available? So that's one thing. And then the second question was, you said you don't know what we could do about units that are already been leased up. So if a commitment is made and the units are filled before the commitment is made, does that mean that the commitment goes away? And do we get to call those entities to the table and say that, there was a commitment that was made? So if you have any units open, you should then make sure you notify us so that we have a first opportunity to take advantage of them. Can we do that?
So in terms of units that are leased, we can only go by what's in the contract that has been signed and executed between the city and the developers. So if there's nothing in the contract stating you must take referrals from the continuum of care, then there's nothing we can do. That contract signed, sealed, delivered, and you're not going to be able to go back and rewrite that contract, from my understanding. It would be kind of going back and asking, would you consider, hey, you know what? You said you would do this in your RFP. It's not in the contract. Would you honor what you put in the RFP, and sort of relying on some goodwill? Is that a possibility? Sure. Would it maybe require them to change some tenant selection plans? Maybe. So right now, where we're kind of focused right now is, let's not try and go undo things that are already done. Let's make sure we get the units that are coming online and figuring out what can be done with those units and timelines, and who are the property managers, and are any of these units, I don't want to say set aside, because it's not necessarily a set aside. It would be more of a preference. There would be a preference for a household exiting homelessness. But then you would also have people saying, well, there should be a preference for veterans, or there should be a preference for people living with HIV and AIDS, or there should be a preference for low-income households with, children under the age of 2. Whatever the case may be, there could be a preference for any number of things, and that's where the tenant selection plans come into place that sort of outline how are units given out according to a plan, and ensuring that those tenant selection plans and the decisions don't violate fair housing laws and don't violate other regulations that may be in place due to if federal money, home, or CDBG money are in those projects.
Russ, we have a, yes.
Okay. So I think I'm trying to, I guess one question I have is, who holds community development accountable on this? Is it something in the city structure? Is it I think there's a community advisory board. Is it the Affordable Housing Implementation Group? I think there's an open seat on that. So I feel like somebody from the homeless service system among the group on the phone needs to figure out how to get someone appointed that can be raising these concerns. Because Colin, I feel like what I hear you saying, and I get it is quite a process. I'm still dealing with some Carver Creek related pieces between contract and CD and the city attorneys and county attorneys. I get that. But what I hear you saying is it's possible that our affordable housing bond funds in an RFP, people committed to doing things that are inside their proposals, but that didn't get translated into the contracts. And so now we've basically lost that opportunity for those units to be used for our populations and to be referred through our like coordinated entry system. Is that part of what you're telling us may have happened?
That is what I'm articulating, yes.
And I realize you're the messenger. You're not.
Yeah, I mean, please don't shoot me.
This
I'm
is
just,
not in, this is
it-
not, this is a broader, with
this
other
is,
teams in the department and
yes,
with other
we-
departments is what I
yes.
feel like I hear you saying.
yes, we may have lost some things because as you articulated, Russ, these contracts do get incredibly complicated. And there are multiple lawyers from multiple different places, all laying eyes and writing and drafting and putting in, taking out, and working through contracting processes. Is it possible? And I think that's what we're trying to go through and reconcile of what's in contracts, what was said in RFPs. Is there anything that can be done? And I don't have an answer for that. I'm not a lawyer, nor am I in charge of of all of these contracts. Who holds community development responsible for all this? I don't have an answer for that. I would assume it would be the Housing Oversight Committee and City Manager's Office would be that, but that's me just sort of thinking through steps of we have a housing bond. And I think I don't know if City Manager Page is here. She might be able to answer that question better than I can. And I apologize, Manager Page, if I overstepped. So I'm trying to do the best I can with the information that I have.
So if I am recognized. So certainly this is a very complex and robust conversation that is going on here. There are a lot of people. I see about 43 people. As you mentioned, Russ and others, Colin is the messenger. Colin does not work directly in the multifamily housing development space for which there are units that are affordable in much of that space. And what I hear here is there is some suspicion or suspect that some of the commitments made in RFPs may not have been translated into outcomes that are in existence. And I would say that sounds like not something that we do when we are implementing from the beginning to the end. I realize anything can be a possibility, and I do realize that this group deserves a full accounting of what was in a proposal, what was accepted by by the city or whomever is entering into a future negotiation and agreement with a proposer, and how that got translated into a contract that we now make sure that we're in compliance with those terms. So that everything that we do is public and open. So all of those documents can be reviewed and or evaluated. But I don't want to leave this conversation with all these people in here, assuming that the city is not compliant with documents that were part of a RFP process. There's certainly, multiple levels of affordability in those affordable housing communities. Some have project-based vouchers. Some just have, 30% or below, or 30 to 60 is what we're talking about in the population here with the supportive services. But when you talk about commitments to dedication to a particular system or particular group, that needs a full, transparent process. And I want folks to know that from the city government standpoint, we would not be hiding any of that information.
And thank you, Ms. Page. I know that this conversation is very important to us, but we have come to our time. So maybe Colin, next month we'll be able to talk more about our plans. We can share more information. We can ask more questions, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Okay. Yes, okay. Okay,
Madam Chair.
yes, yes,
This is a conversation I think that needs to be had. I am more than willing to put this on policy and planning agenda. Our agenda is gonna grow, but that's where the work happens. I am more than willing to put this on policy, planning agenda. It can be have a recurrent spot on the agenda if we need it to, because I think this is something that we need to talk to, we need to think through. We need to get voices who are being left from the table to the table so that we can inform our government of what boots on the ground looks like when policies and decisions are made and how they translate up and down. So I am willing to make space.
thank you. Thank you so much. I am going to my notes now. Are there any announcements from HSAC or COC members? If so, you can unmute and share your announcements. Going once, going twice, 3 times. Okay, we'll move along. Our reminders is the next executive committee meeting. Again, if you want to get plugged in and make your voice, let your voice be heard, please plan to join one of these committee meetings. The next executive committee meeting is the first Friday, which is November the 1st, from 10 a.m. to 11:30. The next policy and planning committee is the second Monday, and that is November the 4th, from 10:30 to 12. And then the next performance management meeting is the second Thursday, and then that is November the 7th, from 10 to 11:30. And all of these meetings are virtual. And the next full exec meeting like today will be November the 13th, from 3 to 4:30. So at this time, I am making a motion to adjourn our meeting.
Second.
Everyone have an amazing month, and we'll meet again next month.
Thank you all so much.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day.